Hello, friends, and welcome to the Doing What Matters podcast. I'm your host, Teresa McCloy.
And I'm your co host, Erica Vinson. And we're thrilled that you're listening in today as we dive into discussions about life, business, and all the things that truly matter.
Here on the Doing What Matters podcast, we embrace a very holistic approach to living, a way of life that's rooted in rest, not rush. It's about connecting to our real self, our real life, and our real work, and remembering who God uniquely created us to be, and redefining success through a different lens.
So, whether you're here to find inspiration, practical advice, or just a moment of connection, we're glad you're here.
So, before we dive too far into this conversation, we want to invite you to check out the book that I wrote a couple of years ago called Do What Matters, Live from Rest, Not Rush. And you can find that at dowhatmattersbook.com. You can find a lot of resources and how to order the book. And the reason we're inviting you to look at that book this week is because in the back of that book, we actually have a glossary of terms, which sounds kind of crazy when you think about why would you need to write a book that has a glossary of terms. And one thing that I think Eric and I would agree that we've both noticed as we've worked in this coaching world and world of helping others for a while is how much language matters and how much words that we are telling ourselves matter, especially around things like a rule of life process. So, as you're creating how you want to live out your life and how you want it to be, the stories or the words that you're telling yourself are so important. So, in the back of that book, we just have some glossary of terms that you'll actually even hear us talking about today on the podcast that we have seen through years of working with our clients, how it affects how they live out their life, both personally and professionally. So, Erica, let's just dive into talking about the power of words, how language that we're telling ourselves inside our head or language that we're speaking out loud matters.
Well, from a very early age in a child's development, as humans, words matter. As you said, language matters, and it plays into our cognitive development as we think about connecting verbal and visual things and our social development and how we learn to express the things that we feel and what's that called, when the tears come, and the emotional development and the physical and all of the things that really roll into who we are begins by how we express ourselves. And
You
so
know,
little kids are like sponges. And
yeah, as you say that, talk about them being sponges. Right now, I'm in Grammy phase and I'm watching my little guy. He's about 15 months old. And I know you remember these days, even when you were teaching, but I'm watching my little guy try to form words. He was at my house last night and he is saying complete sentences with a lot of expression that I have no idea what he's saying. I just have to agree and say, sure, tell me more about that. But I have no idea. But he's already forming language. And as you were teaching, I know you taught at an age where kids were forming language.
absolutely. And environmental print is one of the first things that we begin to recognize. So even for your little grandson, eventually he's going to know that's McDonald's. He may not be reading the word, but he sees the golden arches, Target. I mean, we start to recognize my little nephew does projects with my dad, his grandpa, and Home Depot is no dummy. On every kid's project that they put out there, their logo and their sticker is on it. And you can bet he's going to be shopping at Home Depot as a
Right.
grown young man
Right.
someday.
Yeah, we recognize those things. So, an invitation that we have just as we're talking today in this short time is what's the language? What are the words that you're telling yourself? An example might be if you're constantly referring to your work as stressful, like, oh, I have to go to work today. It's so stressful at work. Like eventually that little river in your brain is forming that's like work is stressful. So now your body's reacting to that. So these thoughts that we're putting inside of our head, this IQ space that we might talk about of a center of intelligence that we're putting in our head, what we're saying matters. What if we thought of work differently? This is a place where I'm growing in my relationship with others or those types of things. So just one example. I don't know of that thought place.
because the meaning that we attach to something helps to shape the reality of it. And so the example that you used about when I start to talk about my work in that rut place of this really is a negative framing, it really impacts how we feel and it impacts how we show up when we go to work. And that language matters.
One of the ways that we have helped to form language, even through some of the work that we do, that you can read about in the book and in other work that we do with our clients, is some language that we use for compartmentalizing, for lack of a better word, the different parts of our life, because that's somewhere that we can start to create stories. You often call them river stories, rut stories, that we create that are false. And one of the big ahas we often see with clients when we're working with them is that they have a lot of different compartments or a lot of different buckets in their lives. And we call those areas of focus. And that word focus says, this matters. This is an area in my life, like my recreation, what I might do for fun matters. My spiritual life matters. My growth in that area, my relationship with my extended family, my work. But it's not like two buckets. Like I have my work and when I'm not working. And that's sometimes as far as some of us get. But if we give more language, more words to those areas of our life that matter, then they're just framed differently in our minds of this matters. I just brought it to my top of mind awareness that, oh, if I really gave some focused attention to my relationship with my kids, it matters.
And looking at them as problems or just things that we have to do can be that negative rut also. And looking at it through a lens of focus offers an opportunity to go, oh, what am I learning here? Even the word stressed, it's an emotion. I feel stressed. And so when we think about stressed, that may be our part of our reality, is that we are stressed in that day. But as we interview that feeling, even to go, okay, what's happening in my reality here that is true? Well, I ran myself short getting to work today in time, or I didn't get something done. And so we can start to piece together why that reality is causing the feeling that it's causing, which kind of helps us to get above it, which is really what areas of focus does as well. It gets us up on the balcony of things
It
and helps us
does.
to focus on the opportunity.
It does. And then when we actually take that one step further in the work that we do, taking that area of focus and writing out some more language, some more words to it, in something that we call an I am statement, which we're going to talk about a little bit as we move towards words that influence emotional responses. So we have words that kind of frame that big reality, that big balcony part. And then we have words that start to frame our emotional responses. And they almost carry like a weight to them. There are positive words that we could use like hope, enthusiasm, confidence, joy. And then there are negative words like stress, the one we just talked about, or fear or doubt, those things. So saying things, and oh my gosh, I hear this all the time from clients. I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. Well, what do you want to coach about today? Or what do you want to talk about? Or even just conversations with friends. Oh, I'm so busy. I'm overwhelmed.
I was just visiting with a young athlete in a coaching conversation recently, and the athlete they're a perfectionist. They value excellence. So doing things right is very important. And when we were talking about, what's happening as you're learning new skills or re-engaging skills that you've done before and really building confidence, like what's happening in between there. And one of the things that the athlete named was, I'm messing up a lot. And you could just hear that the messing up, the messiness, all of that just kept tripping them up. And so just going back and saying, there's something to this messing up piece. There's a message attached to that. So explore that a little bit more. And so they unpacked it just a little bit. And as they did, you could see it was a really negative view that they had on what was going on. It wasn't just, oh, mistakes are happening and they're helping me grow. And so as we did some work, even in asking, how would you like to reframe that? The athlete said, I'm messing. I said, what is messing up? Not to silver lining it, not to paint it rosy, but what is messing up? If you were to look at it through a different lens. And I loved what they said. They said, it's an attempt in learning that doesn't go as planned.
That's great. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so messing up when I start to frame it as an attempt in learning, which I love and I value, that's fun for me, it just didn't go as planned. What happens? And so they started to name all these positive emotions then that were associated with the shift that just happened. It was so powerful.
Yeah, it is. So that influence of an emotional response, going back to that, I'm overwhelmed, like your client reframing it, instead of I'm working through a busy season. So that gives a sense of ownership, of control, of forward moving. The overwhelm feels like this is happening to me and I have no control when we actually do. So reframing, just like your client did, just said, it's an attempt at learning. And yeah, it didn't go as planned. That is many times how we can reframe that. One of the ways we do it, and we talk about it in this glossary of terms in the back of the book, is through something we call I am statements. So many times we'll look at one of those areas in our life that matters to us. And that's great. I could say, my extended family matters to me. But if all I do is say it and I really don't attach anything to it, I just said it. So we take it one step further by giving it more words through an I am statement. So I might say something on my rule of life document that I'm putting together that says, my extended family matters to me. I am seeing them once a month. I'm talking to them on the phone on a weekly basis and spending this amount of time with them, or whatever that might be. Now that gives me some ownership around that and some words that walk that out a little bit further, as in, this is, if you want to say it, almost like a goal statement of, this is how I live in this area of my life. But without those words, it just is, yeah, my family matters to me. Well, how do they matter? How do you want to take that into some language around that? So that's one of the ways, as you were showing with your client and how we walk that out. Another area is, we talked about the thoughts language, we've talked about the emotion language, but the third one being the action words, that the behavior words, the way we label certain things, whether it's specific or non-specific. How do we make things actionable? The difference between a statement like, I hear this sometimes from clients I work with in the business world, I need to work on my business. It's really a vague statement. It's really vague language, instead of this specific language of, I really need to work on a marketing strategy for the next quarter, or I need to work on building a website, or whatever it is. But specific language matters. It makes the next step actionable, and it actually begins to form a story in our head that brings it to a different part of our brain that we're accessing differently.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that I am statement. It's very different to say I will be, or I want to, or I should, than I am. And it's that embracing done energy. So even working on to say I am, focusing on a marketing strategy quarterly through coaching, through accountability, whatever it is, and to be very specific. So the more granular and the more specific that we can get with the meaning that we're attaching to words, the more we can get clarity on and confidence in the action and steps that we take.
One of the ways that we do that in some of the work we do with our coaching process is, we've even given people language like, if it's something that relates to a project you're working on, we don't use the word goals. We like the word project. Again, it's a language and a word, clear back when I was creating the process, that just resonated with me more than goals. And I was just coaching with a client this week, and she shared the same thing. She said, I had such an aha when I had got permission to let go of the word goals and really lean into the word projects. And when you're working on a project, let's say a marketing strategy or something like that, and you create actionable steps, action steps are different than tasks. Tasks is something we have to do. We got to pick up the groceries, pick up the dry cleaning, clean our house, check the email, run the kids here. Those are all tasks. They're not necessarily growth mindset moving us forward. They're helping us function in our everyday, ordinary life. And they're important. They're important in relationship building and just getting responsible things done. But action steps are places where I'm taking some action steps towards moving forward in this relationship with my extended family, for example. I'm taking the action step to go see them, to call them, taking an action step towards something in my marketing plan at my work. That's just such a different way of saying language and making it go into motion in a different way and giving it a category that it goes into. I have action steps and I have tasks that I do actionably.
I think that goals, as we've listened over the years and even paid attention to personal experience, goals can be attached to failure. And so there's expectation,
Sure.
and a project really is expansive in the way that we look at it. We step it out, we may recalibrate a step in a project or realize that, oh, we can take that step out, or that step fit with this step. So there was a connection. And so it really gives us a sense of continuing to build momentum. And it's not something that we're trying to leap up to hit, to meet, but it really is just something that we're moving forward with, which is a very natural way of progressing.
And it makes me think, Erica, about where did our language come from? For many of us, our home environment, nature, nurture have a lot to do with it. And we may have picked up a very negative or a certain way that we heard our parents or our coaches or our teachers or adults that were influential in our lives talk and say things. And they may have thought that was super motivating to us to encourage us or shame us or whatever. And we're still hearing some of those crazy tapes in our head, and we're still hearing some of that language. I remember years ago when I really started um, diving in and becoming obsessed with personal development and language, that I was saying to myself. And I think that was one of the things, if I really admit it deep down underneath, not that I had some horrible childhood or anything like that, but I was looking for, how can I reframe and give ownership to the words I'm telling myself and
Mm.
not let somebody else create the language for me. And so I just encourage you. I know Eric and I both have done lots of work ourselves around this, and I would encourage you to say, what are the words that I want my head to say inside? And what are the words that I want to come out of my mouth as I'm saying things to others? Are they thoughts that I want to say? Are they emotions that I'm stating that are an over exaggeration or those types of things, like I'm overwhelmed? And then how am I living those out and saying, I need this, or I need to work on my business? And could I get a little more specific in what that action actually is? So it just came to mind for me this week. I was sharing with Erica. I just want to talk about words and the power of words, because every week when I'm talking to clients, it comes up in a conversation, just the gift of words. So whether you take those in through books that you read, through people that you hang out with, whatever that might be, the way we talk to ourselves and about ourselves really matters.
It absolutely does. And when we start paying attention to that, we can really bring some intention to the words that we're using. And it's not about overthinking, but it is just noticing that we do have a meaning that could be very different from someone else's meaning. And so it's an opportunity to be curious as well and learn more about ourselves and others as we're paying attention. And it might encourage you to ask some questions. It might encourage you to do some writing, but as you pay attention and just act with greater intention in your speaking and the words you receive, you get different results. And so it'll be exciting to see how that language continues to shape and form how you're being.
One of the ways we'd invite you to, if you've never done any of this kind of work before, a place that you could start and dive in. Number one is pick up the book, maybe read through Do What Matters and see what that process might offer you in language as a life management rule of life system, is what the book contains. Another way is on our website at thereallifeprocess.com. We spell real life with one L. you can go check out a free little download that we have called the Needs and Values Assessment. Some of the most impactful language that you can develop in your life is these are things I need and these are things I value. And having that language to start with can be huge. So it's an introduction to the idea of needs and values. We also have a full assessment, but we'll just invite you to check out that little free download and walk through that and see what you think as it brings you some language of your own.
So as you're paying attention to the words that you use and the words that are shared in your little corner of the world, we want to invite you to remember that every ordinary day has extraordinary moments. You just have to look for them.
We'll be back next week with more from the Doing What Matters podcast.
Have a great week.